Popcorn rice after discussion.
Want to know some more fun facts?
Isn't it awesome to see some of your favorite content creators and favorite people, honestly, that you follow here on this app, be a part of this amazing community called the Nerd Initiative?
I will pass it to you to kick us off on who you are and what you're into.
All right. Yeah. Hi, I'm Ben. Ben Schubert. I am 24 years old. I'm currently a student at the University of Tennessee, UTK. Go Vols. I'm going to school for journalism and electronic media, and I want to basically do this, like what I'm doing right now, talk to people, interview actors, interview comic book writers, and all that jazz, because I love this stuff. Ever since I was a little kid, I grew up, my dad was in the military growing up, and I lived in Italy and Japan growing up. And in Japan, my parents gave me a little more freedom and I was able to leave. And movie tickets were $2 for kids, so I would see movies multiple times over and over and over. And I've just fallen in love with this stuff, And I realized in my second year of college, I was going for business originally. I wanted to open up a skateboard shop. And I realized, I was like, business is not for me. This isn't for me. I then went over to arts. And I've moved so many, like I'm 24 years old. I'm junior in college right now. That's how many times I've switched my major because I just never finished because I'm trying to find out what is for me. And then I got into journalism and I was like, this is fun. I love telling people about things. I love writing. It's just something that's all put together. And you can talk about anything when it comes to journalism, whether it's politics, it's entertainment, like the parking garage down the street that they're doing renovations to, like people need to know about that stuff, so I feel like this is a industry that is, if not growing because of social media, especially we've been talking about it in class and stuff about how newspapers are dying out. And I'm like, yeah, because, the internet exists, so. And a lot of the teachers are trying to understand that. And I'm like, well, it's, social media, internet, articles online. It's all put together. You got to adapt with the times, because as the internet grows, people are going to want to start reporting because everybody can do it now.
Yeah. First of all, that means a lot to me because I consider myself a journalist, have done it for a long time. And it is nice to see young people still wanting to do it, talented people still wanting to do it. When you could obviously you're extremely accomplished at a young age, no matter, where you are, you've done a lot. And it's nice to see that you still want to do that. And that's amazing. But also seeing realistically how things are changing and the landscape's changing and still being interested in the core aspect of what it is, which is speaking to people and getting stories out, which is surprising. Right. In a good way.
And making those connections. And, originally, this wasn't the plan. I was working in a dish room. When I started TikTok, I was working as a dishwasher in the hospital on Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. I was working as a dishwasher in that hospital. It was during COVID. So obviously, my job was one of the most important because, well, I'm cleaning, I'm washing dishes, and people are eating off these dishes. And in my free time, I would just make dumb little videos because I used to do Vines back in high school. I don't know if people remember Vine or not, but yeah, I used to do those. And, I did pretty well. A lot of people were pretty impressed that I had 100 followers because it was hard to get more than 20 on there. It's not as easy as it is on TikTok, but I started gaining a lot of followers, and then I started making friends obviously you guys and Mr. Marvelite, Straw Hat Goofy, Soups and Zeffy, all these guys coming together, and of course, and obviously the girls like Jay Stoobs as well. I'm friends with her. She's amazing. Amanda Just Vibin'. I did that article on her. They're all just amazing people, and growing up, I've never been able to talk about this stuff because, it was nerdy stuff. Nobody cared, but now that these Marvel movies are killing it, Star Wars is killing it, DC is existing. And, I'm just kidding. I'm actually a DC fan through and through. I love DC, but their movies, they need help. But, comics and animation, video games, everything else, I love it. I love DC. If you ask me DC or Marvel, I will tell you DC over every time. But sidetracked for a second. But yeah, I just love talking about that stuff. And when I started on TikTok, I started getting big, and now I'm almost at 300,000 followers. People know me. I just joined a Discord server for comic. I was the UTK has like a thing on Discord where they have all their clubs in Discord. So I found one for comic nerds, and I was like, hey, I'm Ben. It's cool to see other people my age want to talk about comics, because that's like comic books, I should say. But and they were like, oh my gosh, we know you, dude. They were like, what? And they were like, yeah, we've seen you on TikTok. We know exactly who you are. It's awesome that you're here. I was like, yeah, no problem, man. I need friends around here. So it's super cool to just make all these new connections, meet new people. And at the end of the day, I'm learning new things. And that's the most important part.
That's awesome. I mean, it's funny because you have such a good grasp on life. You mentioned earlier, you're 24, you're a junior in college, but the life experience you have is so much more important. And you're laughing, but I think it's true, because look, I remember in my 20s going to grad school, fumbling around. I was, believe it or not, I was working for newspapers. That was awful. But I think we're that's the time of that mattering, like, oh, your age and this and the straight track or whatever, I think is really behind us. And it's really about like what you can create and what you can do. And I actually think you're ahead of the curve, because I will say, like, even in my 30s, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So like I think that matters not. And to your point, like the people you've connected with and the way you carry yourself goes a lot further in what you want to do than any of that stuff.
Yeah, it's super awesome, and I love doing this stuff and meeting the new people, like I said before. And I'm just super excited to see what's next. Like, my goal right now is to get invited to a premiere, because I see all like, I'm friends with all the big creators like Andrew Vigil, and like I said earlier, just Straw Hat Goofy, Theories by T. I'm friends with all these guys. I've talked to them. I've had legit conversations with them. Like Straw Hat Goofy, his podcast, Geeks of the Week. Before he uploaded the first episode, he sent it to me because he knew that I had podcasting experience. And he asked me for my personal like opinion. I was like, here's a couple things you could do and switch it to, keep it up or whatever. But besides that, man, it was great. It was great. And that podcast got them to the top 100 on Spotify in their first week.
Wow.
And I felt so honored that he felt the need to he contacted me personally. And that I felt so honored when that happened, and he's helped me out. Like in my, I did a film class and I needed help on a film studies class, and he helped me. Like I was like, dude, I need some help writing an essay for a film review. And he was like, you came to the right place, so super cool guy. And I hope one day to actually go out to California and meet all of you guys. Like I gotta meet the Keeg Show. I gotta meet Donovan. I gotta meet Stoobs. I gotta meet Soups. I gotta meet them all, because I've known them for almost 2 years, and I just want I want to shake their hand. I want to give them a hug. I want to see them. Because it's so cool to talk about this stuff. But like I said earlier, not a lot of people my age are into comic books. Like people are into comic book movies. That's one thing. But comic books is a whole different, like I've been telling me and 60 Second Comic Facts, we both came up with the same thing. There's a difference between comic book movie talk and comic book talk.
Yeah.
Like there's a fine line right between them. And sure, you could be in the middle of both, but at the end of the day, they're two different places. Mm-hmm. And because comic books, I feel, is its own form, because storytelling with pictures is the oldest form of storytelling, and comic books is just extension to that.
That's awesome. How did you get into comics? And obviously I see a bunch of amazing titles behind you, and you weren't lying about the DC, a lot of Batman back there, a lot of cool stuff back there.
Yeah, getting into comics, like actually, if you ask most people my age about that, like in their mid 20s, early 20s, they won't even tell you comic books is where, like, they didn't go to the comic book store, they didn't go to the newsstand, I watched TV. I watched, like I said earlier, I lived in Italy and Japan growing up, so we didn't have American television. So we watched this thing called AFN, American Armed Forces Network, where they would show Power Rangers, they would show like Cartoon Network, they would show so I didn't grow up in Disney. I grew up with Nickelodeon and Warner Brothers. So in Cartoon Network, so Teen Titans, Justice League Unlimited, all of those shows, but mostly Power Rangers. That was my thing, and it still is. I love Power Rangers to this day, and when I lived in Japan, I got into Super Sentai because that's where it was made. That's where Power Rangers is from. So it's so cool. And I remember in 2011, that's not 2011, 2008 is when Robert Downey Jr. In Iron Man came out. And my dad, like I said before, I've seen movies many, many times, multiple times in theaters. And my dad knew how much I loved that movie the day it came out. And my first ever comic book, and I still have it, it's on my shelf out in my living room. It is an omnibus for the Invincible Iron Man. My dad bought it for me because we had an 11-hour plane ride home. And he bought that for me, and I've kind of just been hooked ever since. But I didn't really start collecting until I got my first job when I was 16. I was a pizza delivery driver, and this shop called Comic Orders, it wasn't even a shop yet. It's in St. Robert, Missouri. I worked there for about a couple of years, but before I started working there, I delivered them a pizza. And he was in a tattoo shop, and in the base or in the attic of the tattoo shop, he was like, "So you're into comics?" I go, "Yeah." And then this dude's like, "Come up here, and I want to show you this." You know, me being stupid, I followed the strange man up into the attic.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, no, and yes, we do joke about this to this day. But he had like a little closet, probably no bigger than my room, just filled with comics, and yeah, and since then I've gone to him, and I still keep in touch with them, and I worked for them for a little bit, and then I ended up moving to Tennessee so I can go to school. But I still keep in touch with them, and they're great people. But that's really how I got into comics. That's when I started collecting and going every week and picking up my tab. And I've been doing this for about like 6-7 years now, and it's crazy to say that. I don't think I've ever said that out loud.
That's awesome. I mean, it's such a cool way to get into it. Man, I also got to say, and I could be completely wrong, do you hear this a lot, and do you feel like you have like an older soul? Like, do you feel like you have kind of like, you kind of have, again, you're ahead of the curve. I feel like you're way more mentally mature than I was at your age by far.
Well, I would say I am, and I'm not. I mean, I do I still currently watch I still watch SpongeBob when it's on, like I'm still watching. I watch cartoons. My sister hates the fact that I watch so many cartoons, man. So it's like my dad's trying, like, I'm trying to convince my dad that cartoons can be for adults too. Like I tried to tell him about Invincible, but he's 60 years old, so it's like he doesn't care, cartoons are for kids. That's his mindset. So I'm like, all right, Dad, whatever. But like I'm watching Invincible, I'm watching Power Rangers. So at heart, I'm still a little kid. I'm getting really excited about Ninja Turtles. Especially the new Seth Rogen movie coming out, and I'm like so excited about that. So like when it comes to like stuff like that's for kids, I still get excited about it. But I would say that I am more mature than some people my age, just because I lived overseas. I would say I'm more worldly, I think is a better word. It's a better word. Because, when I was 8 years old, I went to the Sistine Chapel, and I was actually, fun fact, I walked into the Michelangelo room. I mean, the Raphael room. My dad was like, "Ben, this is the Raphael room." And we were on a mission trip. My dad and the father was there, and everybody was there. And I was like, "This is not the Raphael room." He goes, "Why not?" I was like, "Look, there's not a turtle anywhere in sight, Dad."
And you're going to say that.
Yeah, and now I'm like so big into art. I took an art history class and I fell in love. And I would, if I could go back now, like to actually appreciate going to the Sistine Chapel, I would totally go. Because I love that stuff. I'm big into music. I'm big into art. I love learning new things. I love like grabbing. I want to learn everything. Like I mentioned this in a video recently. I've been skateboarding since I was 5. I'm a skateboarder as well. I also play guitar. There's so many things that I do but comic books is where it's at, and I feel like you can tell so many great stories through it, and it's definitely a cool medium to where you can reach everything.
Yeah. And it seems like you have a tie to classic things, right? Like it's funny, like you talk about newspapers and we talk about comic books too. And I will say, like, as a kid, I remember being in the comic shop, and I do think people now, and they're coming back, which is great. I mean, when things went completely digital, people miss that excitement. And I was talking to Dan Jurgens about this, we were talking about the 30th anniversary of Death of Superman. And
yeah,
for as much, crap as that got, like, I remember that and Breaking of Batman around the same time. And I was like a young kid back then, but I remember how excited everybody was. And he said the same thing. Like he would go to signings and there'd be like lines around the store. And like, it's just such a cool experience. And it seems like you have a tie to that, like with the art angle as well. Like a lot of people don't, I think people really live digitally right now, and they don't as much physically touch the mediums and the hobbies and the fans that think that they are. And it's interesting that you're doing that. That's kind of it's a very self-awareness aspect of you, which is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason is the fact that I worked at a comic book store and we were in a small town, and so, selling books, that was the prerogative. Like we had to do that. That was the goal. We have to sell books, and we have to make, like, we just barely made budget every week, so because it was a town of maybe 4,000 people, but the fact that we were next to a military base where most people go to basic training and they're allowed to go off base, these guys are like 20 years old, they need some reading material, because they're not allowed to have phones. So they come in and they just buy us out. So luckily we lucked out there. But, overall, I remember people would come in and ask me where they can download comic books online. And I'm like, I know, but I'm not going to tell you, because you know what? If you do that, that's basically walking into a place of business and asking them how you can take their money.
Yeah.
And I actually read an article once that said for every comic book that's bought, 200 people have read it. And that's why I constantly push buying comic books, whether, like, even if it's digital. I would prefer if you guys got it physically, because local comic book shops, they need to stay alive. But, if you don't have one near you, get, the Kindle app is available. And then there's Comixology and all the, keeping these alive, but people are illegally downloading it. And then they're wondering why these books are just getting more and more expensive over time. It's like, because they're not selling. Mm-hmm. And DC, if I'm not wrong, didn't they like lay off like 10% of their writers at one point? Yeah, because they couldn't afford to pay them. And they were like, oh, they're a big company, it's okay. No, it's not. They literally laid off 10. And I hate seeing that, and I would hate for this industry to die. And I don't think it is, because like I said, storytelling through pictures is the oldest form of media, but it's just, I get it that everybody wants to be part of it, but it's not a cheap hobby,
Yeah.
I worked on cars over the summer. I worked at a place called Brake Check in Texas. And there was one guy who came in, he told me he was into comic books, and he was just like, it's crazy. I used to be a huge car guy. I used to pimp out cars and everything. I got into comic books and it's more expensive than cars. And I'm like, yeah, it sucks. Yeah. But, sometimes it's the sacrifice we make for the love for this stuff, and I'm so glad and I am glad that more people are getting into it. I just wish that people could do it right. I don't want you guys, I would hate to work 40 hours a week and not get paid for it,
Well, if you go to conventions and stuff, I mean, I'm sure you're aware, like when I haven't gone to conventions in years, and we started going recently and went to Terrificon, and I was really pleased to walk around and see all the Hero Initiative buckets that were there. And for people that don't know, it's like the Hero Initiative, I mean, the artists are just, I think even still to this day, are just not paid what they should be paid. And it's really awful. And they used to be worse, except for like the big names, like the McFarlanes and the Jim Lees and those kind of guys. But a lot of these guys, especially the ones that are accomplished, like don't even want money. They want tips for Hero Initiative to help out the lesser known artists that are kind of, and it's just to what you're saying, like not getting paid what they deserve. It's just crazy to think if someone could do a cover for a book that sells like 100,000 copies and then they're living paycheck to paycheck. It's just really awful.
And that's one thing I notice a lot, especially like if something controversial, quote unquote, happens in the comic books, like Superman's bisexual, okay. And then I've noticed a lot of news outlets like to say these highly paid writers, and I'm like, oh, you guys started off with a joke. That was cool. No, they're not highly paid. Like Tom Taylor, the writer who did that book, I think he wrote 17 books in the past 2 years. And not 17 issues, 17 graphic novels.
Wow.
Like that, like he loves doing it, and I know he loves his job, and he's a great writer. He's one of my favorite writers of all time, or one of my favorite current writers, I should say. And, and I'm glad that he's putting out all this work, but I know he's not getting as much respect as he deserves for it, So I always push people, and I try to be a positive voice in the comic book community, especially because it can be very toxic, doing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's really, again, it's really astute of you to be aware of that thing. I was not as a kid. You know, you always idolize these people, and you're like, oh my god, you know. And
Yeah.
growing up with like a mix of like sports and then comics, you know, sports is just on a different level. Like the players that you know are their contracts are they're laughable. But when you think
Yeah.
about like these icons that you knew, you know, they're not everyone's a Stan Lee, and it's sad
Exactly.
because it's just like everyone knows the class, or most people know the classic stories of like the Jack Kirby's or you know, what's my thinking of right now? Just like the
Yeah, Steve
icon.
Ditko.
Yeah, Ditko. Oh, Ditko. Oh yeah, Ditko. And then obviously not Bob Kane, but who,
Yep.
yeah, oh, it's awful. And these stories
Yeah.
are terrible.
And
Uh,
it sucks because you're saying that they go to cons to just make up for that money. And sometimes, like, I went to Fanboy Expo last year here in Knoxville, and I got to talk with Arthur Sudam. I got to talk with Tony Isabella. Tony Isabella created Black Lightning, right?
yeah.
I got to talk to him for 20 minutes because there was no line, you know? And
Oh,
that's the big, and all these people, they're just like, oh man, we love this stuff. And I'm like, are you, the creator of Black Lightning's right there, Arthur Sudam. By the way, I don't know if you've ever met Arthur Sudam. He's the zombie, like comic book zombie guy. He did all the covers for Marvel Zombies. He did a couple variants for Deceased. Um, and like he did all the covers for Marvel Zombies. Like that's what he's most known for. But he actually he did what is it? That one right there, the Deceased right there, the
nice.
Superman.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and he signed it for me. One of the nicest guys in the world. And it was the day after the Marvel Zombies What If episode came out. And I went up to him and I immediately asked him. That was my first question. I was like, "So did you see it?" And he goes, "No." He knew exactly what I was talking about. And I go, "Why didn't you see it?" He goes, "I'm not watching it." And I go, "Why not?" And he goes,
I get
"Because
it.
it's not live action." That's what he said. And that's what he said. And you know, Robert Kirkman, the writer of Walking Dead and Invincible, you know, both very popular TV shows. He didn't even know that they were making a project based on his story. You know, and it's
Uh,
like literally he found out the same day we did. You know, and I'm like, Robert, and it's animated. Robert Kirkman, Invincible, you know, Walking Dead. Like he is an executive producer on both of those. Why wouldn't you want him
yeah.
to be part of this project? Like this is his. You know, and that's why I'm really glad that companies like Amazon Prime are really getting like Paper Girls. I don't know if you saw that yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Loved it. And guess who was an executive producer on it? You know, Brian K. Vaughan, the writer. You know, and you know, then there's the boys. You know, Garth Ennis does help out with that.
Yeah.
As much as I don't really care for the boys comic book, you know, I really like the show. It's really awesome. You know, and then there's other stuff like I believe 8 Billion Genies just got picked up for a movie, if I'm not
Yeah. Yeah.
mistaken. Yeah, you know, so and that's a newer book by Charles Soule that's literally, and if you guys want to check that book out, it is awesome. By the way, you know, and you know, Spawn and stuff like that, they're just getting so like Netflix and Amazon Prime, and they're letting the writers and artists be a part of it because they created it. They should be a part of it, you
Yeah.
know, and the reason why a lot of people know Stan Lee is because he did his cameos. And I'm like, you know, honestly, I feel like if you just ask these writers if they want to make a small cameo in a movie, I think they love it. And,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
Marvel's getting a little better about it. Like Kelly Sue DeConnick was in Captain Marvel, but it was so brushed over, it wasn't even funny. You know, like Jim Starlin was in Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
You know, so he got a speaking line, so that one was pretty a lot of. But you know, James Gunn in the Suicide Squad, you know, John Ostrander was the doctor that put the bomb in the back of Saban's neck. You know, and so all these writers and artists, like, but you know what? I feel like who wrote the Hawkeye run? David and Matt Fraction. Matt Fraction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like he was an executive producer on the Hawkeye show. Or, no, he was a consultant. My bad. And I think he would have loved to be in that. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like you know,
I think
like
they
have him
all
be
would. They all
one of
would
the
love
yeah, and you know, or the what is like Shang-Chi. I'm sure Jim Lee or not Jim Lee, Jim Starlin would have loved to be part of that.
Mm.
You know, I saw in Venom 2 there was a magazine of Stan Lee. It's great. You know, I get it. Stan Lee is an icon, but you know what? Todd McFarlane is still very much alive, and I know damn
Yeah.
well he would have loved to be in that movie. Or Cullen Bunn, or anybody really.
McFarlane's still writing, still doing Spawn. McFarlane's
Yeah.
still doing Spawn to this very day, right?
Yeah, he holds a world record. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
But
great.
yeah, but that was but for Venom, like he helped create well, he didn't he helped create the story for Venom. Like I think somebody else came up with the design. I think that was like I know that story about how Venom, like somebody entered a contest and won $75, and then
Yeah.
yeah. But Todd McFarlane's the one that like wrote the story, so like why can't he get a shout out? And Into the Spider-Verse did a really cool thing where they put all the names in this phone. But I feel like we can do that. Like, why don't we ask these writers? Like, you didn't mind asking Stan Lee to be part of these. Why don't you just ask another writer? To make a cameo? Like, I feel like that would be the best way. One, they're getting paid to be in these movies, so they're getting paid more, that's for sure. And two, they get their names out there. The Eric Voss will break down everything. Theories by T breaks down everything. And I guarantee you, they will point that out for you.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's, and I would love to just see that happen, and that's why I talk about comic. Like, I changed my bio recently to a comic book historian on TikTok, because I talk about comic book. Maybe I do side with DC a little more than Marvel, but everybody talks about Marvel, so I don't really think I have to worry about that.
That's fair.
But DC gets a lot of hate, and for no reason. And same with indie comics. Like recently, I had to make a whole video explaining what an indie comic was and how the Ninja Turtles are not part of DC and that they're an indie comic. And like, people are now, they were like, wait, they're not DC, because they showed up in Injustice and they did crossover with Batman. That is true.
But yeah, that happens all the time.
So I can understand why people would think that, but no, Ninja Turtles is an indie.
That's why those comics are so valuable, because they were such a small. They were like literally
3,000 copies.
Yeah. And even the second and third printings are valuable. I find that stuff fascinating too. I mean, that's also another thing that really is an aspect of the printed copy, is like, these are pieces of history. Like, I can imagine being in conventions and having a Ninja Turtles 1, like, signed by Kevin, like, and not even, this is kind of a cool comic, let me get this signed, and like holding on to that and not knowing it's going to be what it's going to be. And then you have this rare piece of history years later that's worth like, 40, 50 grand or whatever it is. But it's super cool that it's like this, whatever.
Like yesterday, I had some friends over and I was showing them everything I had. And they were like, so are all these books like first appearances? I was like, well, not all of them are first appearances. Some of them are signed. Some of them are just $high dollar books. And some of them just mean a lot to me. You know? So, and I explained every single one. Like, I think I went through the entire room and I explained every single one to them and why I have. Like, these are on my wall for a reason, and I can do that. And I think part of the reason why I've always been able to just like remember a lot of dumb information. So it's like, I feel like it's just easy for me to just talk about it, and I love it when people ask me questions, especially on TikTok, like, because I know a lot of little kids follow me and they're learning about this stuff, and I'm telling them about these characters, and I'm so glad that they are so interested. And I've told people this all the time. I'm so glad a little kid can talk about Captain America at school and not have to worry about being picked on about it, because I had to worry about that, so it's so cool that people are finding it cool to do this stuff.
Dude, that's awesome. I got to ask you about some of the comics then. Like, I mean, I love the stories that go with important comics, and I feel like especially you are going to have some really cool ones. Are there any behind you that, like, I mean, it's hard to, you can't rank, I'm not going to have you rank your books, but like, and that stick out that like really mean a lot to you, like much like you said, the one that's in the hall that you had the first comic you got, what behind you means something to you, like, in the story behind it? Because I love hearing about stuff like that.
Well, it's kind of hard to see, but right there next to my Infinity Gauntlet, under the Spider-Man one here, this one right here. Okay. That is my first appearance of Beast Boy. I just recently picked that up. Beast Boy is one of my favorite characters of all time, bro. So, I love Beast Boy. I grew up watching Teen Titans in 2001, and I would love to meet Greg Sipes or Ryan Potter or even Jake T. Austin.
Time out for 1 second.
Yes.
I went to high school with Greg Sipes.
No way. That's awesome.
Swear to God. When you said
is he as weird in real life or in high
he was,
school
I wasn't, so my best friend, who was actually the best man at my wedding, was friends with him or friendly with him, because he was an interesting guy even at that age. And I
feel like he's always been an interesting person.
And even back then, I think in high school and in like the early years of college, because this is back in Florida, right? This is South Florida. He was from Coral Springs, like where I'm from. It's like a Boca Raton area. And like the one story I remember about Greg Sipes, and again, I wasn't even there, but it's funny that I heard like one degree of separation was that they all went golfing one time. And
Right.
Whatever. And he was literally like surfing the golfing carts.
It sounds like something he would do.
They were like, and then I remember he went, it's funny because you follow these people that and you went to school with. And I remember he was in a very short-lived show on MTV. Are you aware of this? That was like following.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast called Talking Tunes where Rob Paulson, one of my favorite voice actors of all time, he just interviews other voice actors. And Greg Sipes basically told us his story from the get-go of how Ninja Turtles inspired him to do karate as a kid and stuff like that, and how he came up with Booyakasha. And Greg Sipes, I know so much about. He even follows me on Twitter. It made my day when I found out about that.
That's
It's
awesome.
Such a nice guy. But Beast Boy in particular, especially Beast Boy, because I have anxiety and depression. I have ADHD, all things Beast Boy has, and the coolest part about it is, and a lot of people don't believe me when I tell them this, but before he turned green, he was a little white kid with blonde hair that lived overseas with his parents. Me. Yeah, wow. So, and that's something that I relate to, I'm always joking around. I'm always having fun. But, there's other adaptations like in this newer book, Beast Boy Loves Raven, or the Beast Boy one by Kami Garcia and Gabriel Piccolo. I think Gabriel Piccolo, when he drew Beast Boy, I think he made him look a little bit like him. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not for sure, but I think he's Brazilian. So I think that this Beast Boy is Brazilian because he made it, like if you look at his self-portrait and Beast Boy, they look very similar. So I think that he may have done that on purpose. And Beast Boy definitely has a darker skin tone. So I think he may be Brazilian. And Ryan Potter, he's Asian. I don't know exactly where, but I know he played Hero in Big Hero 6. And Ryan, but he portrays Beast Boy in the Titans TV series, So I'm glad Beast Boy is one of those characters that everybody can relate to. We all have our difficulties. We're all trying to make jokes, or if we don't relate to him, we know somebody that is him. And that's what I love about him so much. And buying that first appearance, really, it's my favorite comic book that I have. It's my first thing I want to show everybody when I meet them. And I literally have a reprint of Amazing Fantasy 15 right above it, signed by Stan himself. Yeah, it is. And I got, and the story behind it's even better. I got it for $35 in an auction, So yeah. And I immediately sent it to get graded. They verified the signature and said that it was his. And it was super awesome. But the Beast Boy one, I just love Beast Boy. And recently I made a video about him. It has over 630,000 likes on it. I literally just, because somebody asked who went through more pain than Scarlet Witch. I was just like, oh, here's another chance to talk about Beast Boy because he's been through some stuff, so it's like, all right, let's do this, because I love talking about him. And that's the favorite book right there.
That's awesome. Also, have you done an interview with Greg Sipes? You probably have more connection than I do. So.
I have never interviewed. I don't think the most famous person I think I've interviewed is either the creator of Spider-Ham, and that was just out of apparently he was he lived in the same town as me, and he just showed up to a con one day and was like, oh yeah, I created Spider-Ham. I'm like, you're telling me one of my favorite versions of Spider-Man, the creator of him, literally lived 20 minutes from me. That's crazy, and I got to talk to him. And actually, I'm the one who told him that Into the Spider-Verse was a movie. I was like, so how do you feel like your character can be in the movie? He didn't even know. It's a year after the movie came out. He didn't even know. I was like, dude, yeah, he was in a movie. So, but I'm sure he's seen it now. But, he's an old guy, but. And then there's other people, I met a background character from WandaVision, and I'm friends with him on TikTok. Super cool guy. Scott Snyder, he follows me on TikTok, and Cullen Bunn just recently followed me, and it's super cool to have them. But of all the people, I've probably interviewed a lot. I've interviewed a lot of people, but I can't say who the most famous. I'm there's also Straw Hat Goofy, but it was before he was famous. It was before everybody knew his name.
It's definitely not about fame, though, right? I think when the reason I bring up Greg Sipes, we would not know each other from Adam. I just know I went to high school with him, and again, I had friends who was friends with him. But it seems like there's a lot of substance there, and so dude, we got to get you to sit down with him and talk, just because it means a lot to you.
You guys can hook that up. I'd love to.
Oh yeah, we got to that. Yeah, 100%. Because again, it's for me, it's not about like, I've done that. So I did like entertainment reporting for like 10, 15 years. I also went to, it was weird. Our high school was a weird place, even though it was in Coral Springs. Billy Lush also went to high school with us, and he was on like Law and Order and some other things.
Yeah.
Like, so there was two very like in the same age group that was very talented. But like, I love speaking to people, and I feel like you're the same way. That meant a lot. Like a lot of people don't know who Dan Jurgens is. I sat down with him, and the only comic that I've had,
signed by him and Joe Rubinstein.
Yeah, the only comic that I still have from my childhood was Superman 75, which is worth nothing. It's like $20.
Yeah, it's like $8.
So many copies. Yeah, there's so many copies.
People thinking they were going to get their kids through college, And you were talking about how people line up at the doors earlier, and I was just thinking to myself, like I was talking to somebody about that. I was like, I wish I could have saw that, because I grew up in a time like where that wasn't really a thing. Like people, I think the most time I was either free comic book day or it was like, it was either free comic book day or like a really big issue drop, like Action Comics 1000.
Yeah.
And we made an event out of it. But besides, I've never seen a line go out the door. I would love to see that,
Yeah, we need to bring if it's possible.
People are afraid to walk into comic book stores these days.
Yeah, I mean I remember living at the comic book store when I was a kid. I mean, I'm a 90s kid, so I grew up in the 90s, and like that was the thing, like getting packs, breaking them open there, getting comics. Like again, I remember waiting for, super young, but waiting for like the Breaking of Batman to come out, or the Superman, Death of Superman to come out, and it was an event, and you had, I mean, it's funny, everything's
networks and. I see the news report, like there's a person called a comic book historian or something like that, but basically he uploads old clips from the early days of comic books of old interviews with writers. And I'm just like, they don't do that anymore, and I feel like they should. I would love to see a documentary like about the comic book creations or something like that, because it's such a big deal in media these days. Like the Milestone Generations on HBO Max. I don't know if you got around to watching that, but seeing Dennis watching them all talk about Dwayne McDuffie and how much he was such an inspiration. I almost teared up, because that was their friend, and people don't even know the name Dwayne McDuffie, and, the man did something. He created Ben 10. He worked on, he basically, he helped create literally all of the milestones like Static and Icon and Hardware, the Bloodstick. He helped out with all that. And he did so much for people, and nobody really knows his name. And it's so sad to hear that. But everybody knows Stan Lee, Everybody knows this person. Everybody knows this person. Some more people are starting to figure out who Jack Kirby is. I'm getting really glad to hear that more people are just now finding out about Jack Kirby. Or Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. They're also like I have a whole category on my TikTok page called comic book legends, and I talk about a comic book person that I feel is a legend. And a lot of people ask me, why isn't Stan Lee on this list? I was like, because know Stan Lee. Yeah. You already know him. He gets enough love from everybody else. Why? Let's let these other people. Like, I like Stan Lee too. Look, he's a great guy. He was such an inspiration. It's a tragic thing that he's gone. But, there's so many other, like Neil Adams, when he died, I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was like, I wasn't really upset when Stan Lee died. Like, I was like,
well, Stan Lee was also like 95 years old. So I was like, all right,
so we all, I think I kind of pre-mourned.
We should all be that lucky.
Yeah, I kind of pre-mourned his death. But at the same time, I wasn't like people asked me if I was okay, but the day that George Perez died, I was a wreck. The New Teen Titans, by the way, is one of the first series that I've read first issue to last issue, all the way through. Marv Wolfman and George Perez basically raised me, and that's where I found my love for Beast Boy. That's where I found my love for these characters, in the Teen Titans. And I'm so glad that the Doom Patrol show did the Marv Wolfman origin of Cyborg and not the Mother Box, because I feel like that one's so much cooler, and stuff like that. So I'm so glad. And, when George Perez died, you don't see much about it. Like when Stan Lee died, everybody talked about it, But George Perez, he did just as much, if not more, than Stan Lee, if you ask me. There's the Teen Titans, Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Infinity Gauntlet. All of these great projects that everybody cherishes and talks about. They go, oh, Infinity. Like I've heard many people say Infinity War is the best comic book movie. And I would disagree, but whatever. but George Perez is part of the reason why everything looks the way it does. He designed Nightwing's costume. He designed Deathstroke. He designed Maestro.
I have that issue. I have the Deathstroke issue. I love that issue.
Yeah, and it's so cool. Like and Marv Wolfman, he helped write all these characters. He rewrote Changeling. He made teenage superheroes cool because, like, I read a preface that he wrote. He said that when teenage sidekicks came out, he didn't like them. And the reason why is because he couldn't relate to it. Batman and Superman, those are something you could grow up to be, little kids at least. Like, obviously, you can't grow up to be Superman, but kids can see themselves growing up to be Superman. Yeah. But if they're the same age as you and they're able to do triple backflips and, and you're like a little kid, like a scrawny kid like me that can't even do a jumping jack, like, how do you relate to that? And Marv Wolfman then said, you know what, I'm gonna write the Teen Titans, and he did it so perfectly. And everybody who wants to get into comic books, I always recommend. I was like, did you watch Teen Titans growing up? I was like, yeah, check out the new Teen Titans by Marv Wolfman and George Perez because it's so good. And they don't get enough credit. Like, Marv Wolfman made a little cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and not many people know that.
Yeah.
And he even said, my name's Marv. Or some, and I just want these writers, and that's why I do what I do. That's why I talk about all of these characters, and that's why I want to bring light to everybody. I want everybody to have, because I believe that everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a purpose on this world, whether they like it or not. There's something that they do that will impact somebody in a positive way. I truly believe that.
I love that, dude. I love that.
And I feel like everybody needs to know, everybody should know who you are. Everybody shouldn't be afraid to come out and say who they are and what they do. I want to tell people about these people. Like, I will tell you about Kevin Smith. I will tell you about Neil Adams. I will tell you about George Perez. Heck, I'll even tell you about, like, all of these other, like, indie writers, like Chim Zdarsky, all these people out there, in Shape Comics, especially, like, the Shape Man. I don't know if you've heard about that. Boyd, he was a kid and he created all these superheroes, and now he's 20 years old and a sophomore in college, and he's already published his first comic book with the character that he created as a child, and that's what's going to be in my next article. Yeah, and I feel like people need to know about that. That's a story.
That's awesome. Yeah,
it's so, like, that's something that sounds ripped right out of a movie.
Yeah.
But it's real life, and nobody knows that. People know these characters. They go, oh, Batman's my favorite character. Who created him?
Yeah.
Like,
they know the backstory behind Bob Kane and Bill Finger and what happened to Bill Finger, and
Bill Finger had to die for people to find that out. Mm-hmm. And, like, it wasn't till 2015. That's when they started, because
they started adding his name into the credits.
For everybody listening, in the credits, it always says Batman created by Bob Kane, but I think it was Justice League Doom, I want to say. I'm not for sure. Don't quote me on this. But that was the first time you say Batman created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Yeah. That's the first time they did it. And I was like blown away when they did that. And I'm glad that these writers are getting the credit for what they do, but at the same time, like, I feel like they can do more. Companies can do more, like, especially the movie companies. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby may have created these characters, but who wrote them? Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created the X-Men. Who's the writer that is known for X-Men?
Yeah,
Chris Claremont, exactly. So, or for example, the Guardians of the Galaxy, or characters like that. You're like, yeah, Stan Lee wrote like one issue, and like the High Evolutionary and Adam Warlock. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did create him. Wrote 2 issues, and he wasn't even called Adam Warlock. He was just called, like, he was meant to be just a perfect being. But then 2 other guys got on it. Their names are, like, literally their names have just lost my mind. I don't know why, but they wrote Adam Warlock's story. They made him go to the High Evolutionary, and that's what Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is going to be loosely based on, because High Evolutionary is going to be there. Adam Warlock's going to be in it. But you know what it's going to say at the end of the movie? Adam Warlock, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. That doesn't seem fair to me.
No. And you mentioned Neil Adams. I mean, it's funny when, first of all, something you need to check out that you'll love. Have you seen Robert Kirkman's History of Comics?
No, I haven't.
So a lot of people haven't seen it. It's on Prime. I actually bought it. We'll talk later on, but, like, if you don't want to there's like 6 or 7 episodes. It's really great. It goes into, and Neil's featured. So it's a couple of years old. It's probably like 2016. Neil's obviously featured highly in the episode that's about Superman, which he was the lightning rod for getting Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster like the credit that they deserve, because talk about guys who actually created the biggest of all time superhero.
Yeah.
And they were destitute as well. They were just like Bill Finger, destitute. They were working working odd jobs. I think one of them might have passed, which is really sad, before they got the credit. And then it wasn't until the 1980 or 1979 Superman that they finally got like their name. And that was all, I think, was it that one? Neil fought for that. That was really Neil, who again, that's why I like, it's funny, before he passed, like I put him down as someone I wanted to speak to, because like, I don't think people will see things, and I think you'll understand this more than most. People will see things and be like, oh, that's nice that he did this. But they don't understand like how hard it is and how unique it is that someone does something for somebody else without anything in it for them. That is so rare. And for Neil Adams to go out of his way, he was doing Superman and doing that. I think he was already doing it, right, for DC, and to go out of his way to try to get them credit and work hard on that. And I think he got a letter from one of them, because I think Jerry or Joel, who was still around, was writing all the different artists and being like, this is what happened to us. That's just so rare, man, that someone does something like that. And the world would be better off with more people like that in it.
And I find it so ironic, because like in Stanley's memoir, he talked about, or Stanley's documentary, they talked about how when they first started writing, they wouldn't admit to writing comic books. They would say that they would write story. They were writers. They wouldn't admit to it because it was embarrassing, and people would make fun of them. And ironically, the people that made fun of them are now profiting off of it.
Yeah.
And like they're profiting, like Walt Disney and all that. Like I'm not saying Disney like personally made fun of them, but like the big companies like that. Yeah. Like the heads. They were like, oh, you write for kids? Like, yeah, I do.
I always thought, because when Stan Lee started, he was at Timely before it was Marvel, but he started, he had family connections to Timely and whatever, but he started in the 1940s.
Yeah, his uncle was Martin Goodman, the creator of Timely. Yeah.
I always thought he changed his name because the Jewish connection, right? His name was Stanley Lieber. I always thought, I didn't realize until watching a documentary, and might be the same one, maybe a different one, that he admitted, he's like, I changed my name because I was so embarrassed of what I did. It was like working for the tabloids. Like everyone would go to parties and everyone would be like, what do you do? And they're like, I write comics, and they would all like stick up their noses at you. Yeah. And that's amazing to me, that like I had this misconception for so long that he changed his name because of anti-Semitism, and what it wasn't. It was because people hated comic book writers. It's just crazy to me. And
now everybody is so thankful for all the stuff that they do. And like I said, Stan Lee's an icon, and he's done so much, especially like when Joe Simon and Jack Kirby both left, he was put in charge, and he was no older than me, if not younger. And he was in charge of all of it, So like that's a big thing. And he's done so much, but there's so many other people. Like Robert Kirkman wrote Invincible when he was 23 years old. So that's crazy. Literally a year old. I'm a year older than him. And like I'm sure at the time, like it was meant to be a satire on superheroes, but that show it hit. Like I've seen a lot of people like quote it and talk about how heartfelt it is, and I'm like, originally it was just meant to be a joke. And I think it's great that all these writers are we're getting our foot in the door of giving these writers their credit, but can we please do it before they die? Please,
you got to check out Kirkman's, and he talks about that too, because he talks about Image, and he also talks about, I think, The Walking Dead at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, I just know you'd love it. Like it is like a 6-part or 7-parter, but it is, you're going to love it. I mean, Kirkman's obviously the produced the whole thing, but he has some great people in it, and the history of it behind it is so good. It's so well done. And I learned a lot from watching it, and I know you'll love it.
Right. And and I love this side of the comic books. I love learning so much about it because it's so cool to see how well they fought for all this stuff. The comics code. And I mean, I said this the other day. I was like, I know a lot of people didn't like it because of the creativity thing, but the fact that if anything, it made them more creative. Because they had to work around it. We can't have vampires, so we give you Morbius, the living vampire. And it's silly. It was the silly comics, and sometimes I'm into that.
So
But but they had to fight for that to get taken down. Like Tom Taylor, Injustice, that would have never been published if the comics code was still up. Deceased, especially Marvel's all these stories that so many people quote. Invincible would have never made it.
no,
The Boys, no, you guys it wouldn't have been. Hell,
Here
even
has
Ninja
a
Turtles,
chance.
even Ninja Turtles wouldn't even have made it because that was originally meant for adults. So it's so cool to see how these characters fight for but the one thing I notice, and it's very toxic, especially on TikTok, and I see it so much, people like to use Stan Lee's name as an argument for anti-Semitism, ironically, because he's Jewish. I don't know why they would think that or homophobia or any like he wouldn't want this, and like this may seem kind of effed up to say, but sometimes I just want to put a microphone to the ground and be like, let's ask him. Like he's gone. I get it. We miss him. He did so much, but we got to move on. There's so many other people that deserve a shine in the light. And
I think if you look at we can move to the next topic, but I think if you look at the history of his work and what he did, whether it was Black Panther or whether it was even Captain America, knocking out Hitler in the first cover, like he and Marvel, and that's what made Marvel so special, was pushing the envelope. I think DC has some of the most amazing characters in the history of comics. But I think Marvel really pushed the envelope and made things more real. So for anyone who I just think that's people pushing their own thoughts and, the toxicity and whatnot. Like, it's unfortunate that people use that as a excuse because that's not.
And there's written documents, even interviews with him saying that's not, that just proves it's just not true. And and I hate that fact. And people try to say that it's ruining the MCU. He would hate the MCU today. I'm like, honestly, I don't think he really cared. Like people think that he was in charge before no, the only thing he was probably profiting on was those cameos. If I'm going to be honest, like that's probably the only thing he was getting paid for. There was somebody else in the editor's seat. He wasn't like he was done at that point.
Yeah. Anytime there's change, this always happens and things pop up. I mean, I again, I was really, really young, but even like if you think about Ellen DeGeneres, like when she came out as the character in her show, that was, again, I was super young, but that was like, and now it's moved on. But at the time, man, the press was rough on that. And it's unfortunate. And we see a lot of like people that end up being on the wrong side of history. And I think
exactly
we're going to see the same thing. Anyone who like fights against change or equality or even, I mean, I think there needs to be variety in entertainment to where it represents the world we live in, but also is fun and relatable for all different kinds of people. And then it grows. I always say this, it grows your horizon. Like listening to a lot of people that we connect with, like Amira and some other people that are in like listening and talking to them during the Miss Marvel run, I learned so much.
Yeah, actually, today I went to an Asian festival where like basically you can go to different countries where people from different countries had like their own little booth and they told you about their culture and all that. I went to Pakistan today and I was telling them all this stuff that I've been learning, especially from the TikTok creator, because they've been talking about Miss Marvel so much. And I'm so happy that they have their show and that like they have a character that they can relate to. I think that's so cool. And I've been learning so much about Pakistani culture. And I told them, they were like, how do you know so much about this? And I was like, this is going to sound stupid. Okay. But that Marvel show, Miss Marvel? And she goes, yeah. I was like, most of it is from that. A lot of creators are from Pakistan, would talk about it, and they would talk about how this ties back to their heritage and stuff like that. And they were like, really? And I was like, obviously it's a Marvel show, so it's a little like overdone, like, it's blown out of context, obviously. But but deep down, there's still like specks that are there. And I know Sana Amanat, when she wrote
Yeah.
Miss Marvel, there's a Disney Plus docuseries. I don't know if you've ever seen it, called 616. She talked about in the second episode how she never had a character that looked like her. There was never a character. And Aman Vellani, the actress who plays Miss Marvel, it was so funny when she said, I laughed so hard when she said that. She was just like, yeah, I walked into a comic book store one day and I saw this Miss Marvel character, and I've never seen a character that looked like me. And I was like, that's exactly what Sana Amanat was shooting for, and you nailed it. And I'm so glad that she is doing something she likes, because she's one of us. She's a nerd. She's been making fake Reddit posts and fighting with toxic fans.
That's
so
awesome.
I think that's how I love her for that, and she seems like an awesome. I'd love to speak with her one day. Just fan to fan. And I'm so glad that they have all this. And the Pakistan booth, they were so impressed with how well. I was like, well, it's because I've been listening to all these other people. So, because like I said earlier, I love learning new things. I one time saw a video of girls breaking ballerina shoes for some reason, like they snapping, like twisting them and whatnot. And I'm like, and I had a friend who's a ballerina. I sent that video to her. I was like, what are they doing? And she goes, I do that to all my new shoes, so that way I can stand on my toes and it doesn't hurt. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. All right. I wouldn't have known that, so I love like I said, I love these connections that I have,
That's great.
and you were talking about how needs to be a space for everybody. And that is exactly true, because Black Gay Comic Geek, if you don't follow him, he's so awesome. And he mentioned this, like he was also mentioned in my article, the LGBT community.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, he was one of the guys I interviewed for that. And he always said that representation equals normalization. That's how I ended that, because that was such a dang good quote.
So good.
And and he's right. But he often says that if Marvel or if comics started today, it would be so diverse. If not one comic book ever existed and they created Superman right now, I guarantee you he may be white, but for the most part, he probably wouldn't be white. Beast Boy definitely, Beast Boy wouldn't be white. I know, even I will admit, he doesn't act like a white guy sometimes, but in the comic book he is, but that was one thing that really drew me to him. So I kind of deal with that one, but there's other adaptations of him, and I'm so glad that Marvel and DC and indie comics are probably the best at it.
Yeah.
But they're really getting more representation out there. And I'm so glad that here at the Nerd Initiative, there's so many creators that are POC or part of the LGBT. And people there's Donovan, and who was the girl that you were talking about earlier? Who talked about Miss Marvel? Amira, yeah. All of them, they're all such great creators. I'm so glad that I can expand my mind just by talking to them. It's so cool.
Exactly. I mean, speaking of indie, we got to talk. I want to close out with hearing about, dude, you're working on a comic book. You got to talk to me about this, because this is that's an interesting transition. But I want to hear about that, because again, man, that's incredibly impressive. Two, it's also just amazing you're putting yourself out there and doing that. I mean, it's so cool you're creating something. I mean, it's so amazing. You got to tell me all about it, because I really want to hear about everything with
that. I've had this idea for a very long time. I either wanted it to be like a movie or something. I always wanted to make a story. Like I mentioned, I was a pizza delivery driver, and I did that for 3 years. It was probably one of the best jobs I ever had. Their boss, the owner, his name's Dennis, super, super old guy. He always told me, he's like, I'm dyslexic, I'm 17. That's what he says. Or,
that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, he's just a great guy through and through. And he gave me a job. And there were so many occasions where him and his wife, she was like my second mother, and there were so many occasions where they should have fired me, and they didn't, because they knew at heart I was trying to do what was best. And Dennis told me that he read comic books as a kid. So I definitely plan on having the main character. And it's going to be, so let me tell you what the story is first. Basically, it's going to be about a pizza delivery guy who goes to another dimension, and he has to find his way back. He's taking his last delivery, and he has to find his way back to his dimension. And throughout these dimensions, he has to battle terrible customers or monsters, who I'm going to base on some of the worst customers that I have had. throughout my 3 year work as a pizza, and believe me, there's a lot. So, and I've been picking, and like basically each dimension is going to have like a different aesthetic, like maybe like there's going to be a jungle one where everybody's riding on dinosaurs or something, maybe like a video game one or something like that, just like different universes, or maybe one where I'm a girl, like I don't know. So there's so many things that I'm really brainstorming. Like I still haven't even gotten the first issue. I'm still brainstorming this whole thing. But my last issue is going to have him get back home and see his friends. And I'm definitely making it the pizza delivery. Like they're going to invite him in to have a slice. And on the couch, they're going to be watching a movie. It's going to be all the guys from Comic Orders, because those are the dudes that inspired me to do what I do today. Like everything, most of the stuff that I know about comic books today, you can thank a guy named Zach Porter at Comic Orders in Waynesville, Missouri, or Matt Scheimer, they're both just amazing guys. And they're such an inspiration on me. They pushed me to be the better person I was. If I had never met them, I probably would have been throwing my life down the drain. I remember I was skipping school. I was doing nothing. I was literally doing nothing. I was skipping school to sleep or go to the skate park, do nothing. I was throwing my life away. And I met Zach and Matt and all of the other guys at Comic Orders, and they changed my perspective. Zach, he served in the Marines for 13 years, so he had that stern, like fatherly, I don't want to say he was like a father figure to me, but he was kind of like he would go dad mode on me sometimes. I think I would say like he would turn into my father sometimes and tell me like, shut up, like don't do that or something like that. So they definitely pushed me to be the better person that I am, and they introduced me to this franchise and of love that I have for these characters and how to do these things, how to bag and board. They taught me how to be responsible, because they would leave me in charge of the shop by myself. They gave me a key to the comic book store. That was one of the best days of my life, and now I'm out here talking to you guys. I've talked to like famous people all the time, and people watch me, and those are the guys you got to thank, and I wish one day, like I did go back to the shop one day and I made a video with Matt. It went pretty viral. Everybody thought it was funny, because these are guys that they're not in it for the fame. They're not in it. They're in it because they love it, like they do this because they love it, if they can do anything else, but they choose to do comic books. They choose to sell, and like the little kids that come in. I remember like when I worked there was two little girls. They loved horror. They loved horror. Like they were like the Shining twins. It was scary.
That's awesome.
They were like 8-year-old little girls, and they were just like, "Oh, is that Freddy Krueger?" And their mom was so like cool about it. She was like, "Yeah, sometimes we got to skip over some parts, but and we would play along with these kids." Or there's one kid who gets a Sonic book. He has to get it off the shelf. He's like 5 or 6 years old. We put the comic Sonic in his tab. And when we see his car pull up, we take the Sonic comic, put it on the shelf, and then he'll run over and grab it. And they're trying to get more people. And what they're doing is these kids, they're going to grow up and they're going to see this shop and they're going to be like, I had so many good memories there.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about these two guys. And that's why they're going to be in my comic book, especially. And Dennis he's also going to be in this comic. That's going to be the name of the character that's going to be about me, like it's going to be me, but I'm going to name him Dennis after Dennis, because these are the people that turned my life around. These are the guys that they made me go to school. They were like, quit throwing your life away, quit doing stupid stuff, and if it weren't for them, I'd probably, I don't know, be drunk under a underpass or something. My dad would have kicked me out, because it's either you go to school or you work, and I failed my first 2 semesters. I did not do well, and I had to make that up. And that's why my sister's in grad school and she's 22 years old, and I'm 24 and I'm about to finish my last year in college. But I'm so glad that these guys were in my life to do that, and now I'm working with you guys. I have friends like Mr. Marvelite. I got friends like Yasan, all these guys, like literally. And I've seen you guys back me up. I've seen you guys, like, if somebody came after me, I know you guys would like go in the comments like, yo, quit. Like he didn't do it. Like
100%.
I remember one time I was getting death threats because I said that I like DC a little more, Mr. Marvelite, he did not miss a heartbeat. He made a video. And I was so thankful, and I'm so glad that I have people like this in my life that are able to help me through. And because I know not a lot of people have people like that, and that's why it's important to give you guys light. That's why it's important to give people like Zach and Matt light, or people like Dennis. Like all of them, they're so good. And of course, these writers. Because George Perez and Marv Wolfman, I feel like I owe them like babysitting money for all the times that they were, and James Gunn too, because I watched all those Scooby-Doo movies growing up. They for all the babysitting they've done for me. Like, so it's just crazy to see how they just. I love telling people about all this stuff because people think it's cool now. It's so cool now.
Well, man, you are an amazing person, dude. I honestly don't even know how to follow that up, because
thank you.
What I said earlier about Neil Adams easily goes to you as well. I think I say this a lot. I don't say this a lot, actually. I wish I said it more. The world would be a better place with more people like you in it. Just because of positivity, the support. I mean, we need more people like that, and we just, but you're aware of it, and it's amazing, and you're doing what you should be doing right now. I mean, that's all that matters. And I will say,
I'll say thanks to this little app where you make stupid videos.
Yeah,
because that's how it started. That's how it started, and it was just like one day I blew up, and now people are following me, and they come to me for advice, and people like ask me to read their comic books to see if it's any good, and I'm like, if I have time, like, I peruse through it and I'll give them feedback. I'm so glad to do that because this is an industry I want to help grow. This is something comic books I want to be around for a very long time. I want my kids to read it. If I ever have kids, I want my grandkids to read it. I would love to see that, and I'm so glad that so many people are into it now, and that it's reflecting, and people are so more accepting of this stuff. And it's so cool to see that. And now we are starting to get into a phase where we're starting to give more light to people, underrepresented people, because like all the characters, they look like you and I, like there's so many characters that you and I relate to, but there's some people who can't even say that. There's like character that I don't even relate to at all, and that's why I talk about those low budget, those underrated characters, because you know what? Sometimes that's the character that you will know.
Yeah. And we'd all be better people, but also would know more if we had those characters when we were growing up too, And so like the fact that we're getting that more and more, again, you're just a better person and know more, just like your experience abroad and learning different cultures. That's what it's all about. And I think some people want to stay in their lane and do their same thing. I think it's just you're going to be a more fulfilled human being if you know more about people from all different walks of life. That's just how it is.
Yeah. And I'm just so glad that I have all these opportunities now, and that my platform is getting bigger, and I'm glad that more people are listening. It's really cool. And now like big companies are reaching out to me. Like I think I'm helping promoting Tom Taylor's next book.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, and I'm really excited for that. And I told them I was like, by the way, you don't have to worry about a bad review because I've never read a bad book by Tom. So it's like I'm super excited to read it. Like I read the free comic book day preview, and I'm really excited to do this. So they're sending me the book. I can't wait. And I'm just so excited to do all this stuff. And I love bringing light to more people. And my magazine writing teacher noticed that I did that for every single article I did. Like if you notice the LGBT community and the Amanda just vibing, and I also wrote another one. It was about the UT janitorial staff. And actually they do more than I was so surprised when they told me all the stuff that they do. I was like, and this is, and how understaffed they are and how they all have to work together and, get up early, and nobody even gives them a thank you, They don't. They do it because they love it,
Dude, that's the heart of a journalist right there, man. Is
thank you.
Elevating stories and elevating people, man. That's all. That's really all it is.
And that's what I love about this entertainment industry, and I'm so excited. Like I remember Brandon Davis of comicbook.com. He posted online. He said he's about to have a She-Hulk interview, and he didn't say who it was with, but he was like, any questions that you want to hear? Everybody was asking the typical questions, it's like, how does this work? Or how my question, I was like, what was the casting process like? How did you get introduced to, how did Marvel come to you? And how did you feel when they asked? And a lot of people were like, this question, I want to hear the answer to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if he asked it or not, but because it only got like 4 or 5 likes. But I remember a lot of people were commenting on it saying like, that's such a good question. I'm like, literally, because that's what I know people want to hear. I know
Yeah.
what people want to know. And because I listen, I do my best to, at least. And that's why I try to give everybody their platform. That's why I try to boost everybody up. And it's just so great to be part of it.
And hey, soon it's going to be you doing the interview. So
Oh
you'll
yeah,
be
no.
question yourself.
And with the podcast that I'm doing now, I love talking to the other talk creators, because now I do that live on TikTok now. I actually have to edit one out because the last girl I did it with, she had a little bit of a stutter, and I asked her, I was like, hey, is it okay if I edit out the sound to make it sound a little more smoother? I wanted to get her permission, obviously, first, because I didn't want her to listen. And she was like, yes, go right ahead. I was like, okay. So, and she's a Jewish creator. She had 11,000 followers, but it got banned, and now she's building it back up. And in the past month, she's already gotten 3,000 followers back. So,
Okay.
she's killing it. She's a huge Fantastic Four fan, huge She-Hulk fan. So I was like, let's talk She-Hulk. Let's talk Fantastic Four.
That's
Let's do
awesome.
that. Let's talk about things that you love. And that's what I do for the comic comedians. And the comic comedians tagline, I got to put this on the cover. Learn, laugh, repeat. Comic comedians. So that's what I want to push towards people.